Welcome. 10 minutes after the hour, and again, the phone number to call in, it's 888-876-2336, and a great pleasure to welcome attorney Peyton Inge to the show, ladies and gentlemen. He is the trucking attorney of note, and wanted to bring him on board to talk about some very interesting article information that he has put together. This is concerning how to understand your safety measurement scoring system. We're going to get into a lot of conversation about that, and I'm going to read some words from an article that Peyton has put together. It's likely that you built your company from the ground up, growing one truck to multiple vehicles. Your accounts have more freight and you want to keep that business going. Good drivers are scarce, and idle rigs cost a lot of money. The obvious solution is to simply hire more drivers. That sounds easy, right? Well, according to Peyton Inge, not quite. Hold your horses. Peyton, welcome back to the program, sir. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on board, chatting with the drivers out there. And I want to get some information out there about what you do, first and foremost. A lot of folks are out there, listening brand new. They've got a brand new Sirius satellite radio subscription or XM subscription and saying, who the heck is Peyton Inge? Some background, sir, if you will.
Well, thanks. Well, what we do is we defend truckers and trucking companies all across the country, anywhere from New York to L.A., and we go into sometimes some pretty heavy cases, and have been very, very fortunate with the defense verdicts we've gotten over the years.
Okay, outstanding. So, and what is the website as well? I do want to get that out there for the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. The firm's website is ChambleeRyan.com. That's ChambleeRyan, Ryan.com.
All right, outstanding. And I'm going to post all that, drivers. You'll find that as well on SiriusXM's Road Dog Trucking News. When this article was brought to my attention, Peyton, I thought, man, this is going to be a great source of information out there for the drivers. And a little bit more from the article. It says the FMCSA's new safety measurement system monitors the violations accumulated by your drivers and also measures the safety performance of your company against competitors. The worse your score, the more likely the FMCSA will initiate a targeted investigation of the company. And $1 million question is, what can you do to improve your company's safety score? Let's get into some of the specifics with that. SMS scores, are they becoming more important to carriers out there? Talk about the value that these numbers have in the trucking industry.
Well, those values are incredibly important. You're essentially compared with competitors of yours of the same or similar size. Mm-hmm. And the better score you've got, the least likely you are to be further investigated or inspected by the federal government in terms of looking for violations and things like that. You're not going to have somebody showing up at your door wanting to go through your logbooks or going through some of your DQ files. And it's just incredibly important to make sure that you've got absolutely the safest drivers you can get, and that you do whatever you can to increase your safety rating.
Okay, and one driver just sent a message in on Facebook, wanted to know, is this the same thing as the CSA scoring system?
Give or take, yeah.
Okay, all right, outstanding. All right, so I wanted to get that out there as well. And what's important here, prudent planning can address many of the issues before they develop out there. It's possible to retroactively improve your SMS scores by contesting a lot of the violations and then presenting the appropriate proof to the FMCSA, as FMCSA rather, and I would have to imagine that one of the key elements in all of this is be ready. Correct in that? I mean, do you find that a lot of times that many trucking companies are off guard, so to speak? They come in with maybe the FMCSA comes in, conducts an investigation, and maybe a lot of times the trucking company may not know what the problem is. They may not know what those SMS scores are all about. Are they often playing catch-up when these kind of issues come to the table?
Well, what I'm finding more and more is that it's the larger companies are aware of the developments in law and regulation and of kind of the oversight that is possible. And the larger companies are, in many cases, doing what they can to kind of proactively make sure that their files are in order, and they've got the money to make sure that they're running newer equipment, things of that nature. The folks that I see that have problems more often than not are some of the smaller trucking companies, or maybe your middle-sized companies that have gotten gotten bigger over the years, but they've still got that 1980s approach to things where you fix it when it's broken, but if it's still running, you don't worry about it, and you kind of just keep using the same driver hiring policies that you've been using for the last 30 years. Those are the folks that unintentionally sometimes wind up on the wrong end of the microscope.
Okay, and when you say the wrong end of the microscope, we're talking about probably some very thorough compliance reviews that will be initiated, and if there's any problems or violations found, I mean, could this subject a carrier, say, to monetary penalties if there's a pattern of violations that are going on inside of the company?
There are monetary penalties. There are also your extreme cases where a company is placed out of service. But more importantly, what it typically involves is just an extreme degree of inspection. And nobody wants, a government agency taking up your hard working hours by going through all your files for the last 30 years.
Okay, so the SMS system is going to organize the total violations a carrier receives into 7 different categories, and we're going to break down those categories in just a few minutes. But in general terms, the older the violation, is it less likely that will hurt your score when it's compared to some of the competitors with a similar number of trucks out there to determine where exactly you stack up in all of this?
Absolutely. It's graded on a rolling scale. So the older the violation, the less it's going to hurt you.
Okay, and the intent, obviously, behind the SMS is to prevent crashes by detecting the unsafe carriers before the collisions occur. Now, these system scores, are these available online where drivers maybe can look at this, or companies maybe check this out on, say a weekly basis, monthly basis? How often would you recommend these scores be checked out?
They ought to be checked pretty frequently, at least every few months, and you need something in a policy in place with your company that requires drivers to obviously notify you of any moving violations, things like that. And you need to know the second your drivers are pulled over, certainly if they're placed out of service or if there's a logbook violation. You need to know that, stay on top of it, and then proactively address it.
Okay, and brokers, do they monitor this stuff pretty regularly as well? I would imagine that they're going to migrate towards the carriers with the better safety ratings, especially in light of some of the court decisions recently regarding broker liability.
Agreed.
Okay, all right. And insurance companies, they look at this as well?
To be honest with you, I know some of them have looked at it, but I'm not sure how they factored into the kind of the risk analysis that goes into it. I've heard more and more rumors about some of your larger insurance companies looking at it, but nobody seems to know what the exact methodology is that they use to either increase or decrease your insurance rates.
Okay, so again, it's a moving target, so to speak. Some may look at this and make a determination as to whether or not to maybe utilize the business of the trucking company out there. Now, a lot of folks are probably saying, you know what, how do I improve my safety score? What do I need to do, and maybe look at, trying to improve things, make it better out there, where this is going to give me a better chance at the business playing field out there, because obviously all of the companies, I would imagine, are saying, you know what, I don't want these scores to negatively impact me as far as maybe trying to land new business. Drivers, what do you think? Jump into the conversation. Again, it's 888-876-2336 all across North America. I do have to break here for a quick weather update, and it is time for Sirius XM's Road Dog Trucking Weather. The danger of flooding is going to be on the rise this week across the southeast as rounds of rain drench the region. Now, people in Texas to the Carolinas may find their best friends are going to be the umbrellas and the raincoats and the boots this week as the rain and thunderstorm activity soak the region each day, at least through Friday. Now, some locations could pick up over a foot of rain before the week is out. And in addition to all the rain that fell over the weekend, we're going to talk about flash flooding that might occur. The daily rounds of rain will cause many different impacts across the region, ranging from, say, significant flooding to interruptions in daily routines. I do know that some areas of Louisiana, early today, southeast Louisiana has received around 4 to 5 inches of rain. So keep that in mind if you're traveling along the I-20 corridor in the southern tier of states this afternoon. You could run into some very problematic weather. 20 minutes after drivers, and again, my thanks to attorney Peyton Inge for joining me on the program. And again, if you've got a question or a comment for him, it's 888-876-2336. And if you're just now joining us on the program, we are talking about an article that Peyton has put together talking about why it's important for you to know your safety scoring systems. The safety measurement system is a complicated computer program. It catalogs traffic and the Department of Transportation violations accumulated by vehicles operating under your DOT number across the United States. And Peyton's article brings this out. He talks about how the SMS system organizes the total violations a carrier receives into 7 different categories. The older the violation, the less said it hurts your score, which is then compared to competitors with a similar number of trucks to determine where you stack up. Peyton, again, thanks, man, for doing this. And we got a lot of folks that are holding on the line. They've got some questions, and we'll get to that right now. Let's go first to Haas in Illinois. Sir, welcome. You're on with attorney Peyton Inge.
How you guys? How you doing, Peyton? I got
Pretty good. How about yourself?
for you. I got a accident. They say it's an accident. I put the truck in the ditch. It's a foreign vehicle, no DOT number, and they gave me a ticket, and it shows on my DAC that the accident was one day and the ticket was the next day. Will that ever come off my DAC?
On the DAC report, I know it'll roll off. I think it's at the 3-year period, but I could be wrong on that. It depends on a couple of different factors, but I think it should roll off your DAC at about the 3-year mark.
Yeah, it's been on there for 7 years now.
Wow. That you might try and contest that. I've never actually had to contest a DAC report before, but you might try. I know there's a mechanism to do that.
Okay, and again, it does bear witness to the fact drivers need to check their records simply because you may not know what's on there. There may be something that's outstanding on that report, DAC report, SMS, and you got to know about it. So maybe to take steps to try to appeal that or try to get that thing off. Let's go to Sean next up in Indiana. Sean, welcome. You're on with attorney Peyton Inge.
Good afternoon.
Hey there.
Yeah. Hi. There's the SMS score with the basics. Now, what about the PSP? Who keeps track of that? And does FMCSA have anything to do with the PSP?
PSP, I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Oh,
It's,
go ahead.
personal safety profile carriers tend to use on individual drivers.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Long story short, they're correlated, but your employer is not going to have access to that. FMCSA does, and then local law enforcement officials do as well.
Okay, what about insurance companies? Because insurance companies have been tend to known to look at drivers and say, you can't hire him because he's going to really reflect badly on your company.
Insurance companies should not be using that particular system, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you, man. Let's go next to Road Rat. That's a great handle. In California, welcome to the show. You're on with attorney Peyton Inge.
Hey, I appreciate everything you guys do. You had made a statement a little earlier on stating that they were going to go back 20, 30 years. Is there a statute of limitations or a time period that they can go back to look at records rather than just being open-ended and go back forever?
Yeah, and I apologize. When I said 30 years, that was mainly just a general reference. But as long as your personnel and DQ files are in line for the last 3 to 5 years, you're not going to have a problem at all.
Okay. Now, the other thing is I'm just ready to jump out and get my own authority, and so I'm trying to learn how to do this. Is there a place that I can go to get more information on what they're going to look at? Because I'm going to be a one-truck company to start with and stay very small. So I'm competing against a lot of these guys that have bad scores, but I want to get a jump on it and make sure that mine's good from the get-go. I've got a perfect driving record myself up till now, and so I want to be ahead of the curve when I get into it.
Well, once you get your DOT number, that's issued to you. One of the things that they look at, unsafe driving violations that you might get, hours of service violations. out of service violations, things like that, maintenance issues that might put your truck out of service, things like that. And then any crashes, obviously, that you don't have in your case, which is very good, would go into that computation. And you'd be weighed against other one-truck operations. And it sounds like you do pretty well.
All right, let me also point this out to you, sir, that if you contact Joe Rockabots with the Western Trucking Alliance, he can give you some additional help with that. I mean, if you're getting out and trying to get your own authority, and you are in California, Joe's got some inside tips, if you will, on how to get started with that. Again, Joe Rockabots with the Western Trucking Alliance. Peyton, again, thanks, man, for doing this, and obviously a lot of questions about how these scoring systems work out there, and we started out talking about the SMS system, how it assigns your DOT number to a safety and fitness electronic records percentile score. The lower the score, the safer the operation is determined to be. Now, when you look at this overall, I mean, when, say, a company is looking at these numbers out there and they are trying to decipher this, I would imagine one of the first and foremost things is that they might want to try to improve their safety score. And when you look at all of this, what would you say should be some of the main considerations as we get started with that on this list of 7? How do you improve your safety score? I mean, do you have some options that you can maybe bring to the table, so to speak, to maybe get the ball rolling with this? What would you say?
Yeah, from a proactive standpoint, the best thing you can do is hire safe drivers. So you look for folks with proven driving records that are clean and clear. You run your standard MVR report. But then two, in terms of correcting, issues or safety rating that you might have now, what you start doing is anytime a driver gets a violation, you make sure that you retain a local attorney to try and help you resolve some of those tickets or what have you. Number two, you make absolutely certain that you're not getting any hours of service violations. You don't have anybody that's put out of service because they're over their hours, things like that. Those are simple, avoidable steps that any company can take in terms of monitoring their hours of service. Then the number 3 thing you can do is monitor your equipment. You make sure the equipment you have going down the road with your DOT number on it will make it through a vehicle inspection at a DOT weigh station. Okay,
and let me ask you this. I mean, if you are looking at your SMS scores and you say need to make some improvements out there, can a driver be terminated with the intent of maybe improving the safety rating out there? How would you respond to that?
It's not going to help your safety rating to terminate that driver because he would have received his violations or his tickets while using your DOT number. So it doesn't do any good for purposes of your safety rating just to terminate that driver.
Okay. Would any violation that occurs under the DOT number likely be counted against you regardless if that driver works for you after the incident occurred?
Yes.
Okay. And similarly, will a CSA score be impacted by drivers who have violations that occurred before you hired them?
No, should not be.
Okay. All right. Should not be. All right. See, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I would imagine looking forward from a management perspective, the SMS system requires, number one, that you hire safe drivers, and that's I would imagine easily more said than done, so to speak, because of the fact that, you've got to go through a thorough background check. You got to make sure the driver's safety records are compliant out there. Is this where a lot of companies might trip up, so to speak, because they don't conduct a thorough background check or review prior to bringing somebody on board?
Well, in terms of procedure, it's really easy to mess up on, at the hiring standpoint because there are so many different boxes that need to be checked and pieces of paper that need to be filled out.
Okay.
Particularly if you're a larger company, it's easy for somebody just to simply miss a piece of paper. That said, from a high level standpoint, if you're looking for drivers with a long history of a proven track record of safety, those are things that you should be looking for. Now, those drivers are hard to find, particularly in today's economy, but that's what a company ought to be looking for. And you can implement certain things at the hiring level in terms of retraining and things like that to try and proactively instill in your drivers and in your employees a safety conscious awareness of what they need to be doing out there on the road.
I would imagine that this is where a lot of the larger companies have the advantage because they've got entire departments that are set up to handle these kind of things, correct? And that this is probably where a lot of smaller companies that don't have the manpower really can't get into a lot of the minute details here. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's harder for a company, say, with 10 or 20 trucks to stay on top of all that because there's a lot of different pieces of paper coming in. Maybe they have payroll or staffing service that helps out with some of it, but it's really easy to drop the ball and just simply misplace a file or things like that. And if you're ever audited, then that can be a problem.
All right. And as far as remedial type training, if somebody's on the road, they have an infraction or a violation out there, if there's remedial type training for that driver, does that factor into the SMS scoring system as far as maybe making changes? What would you say?
The training won't help with that score for any violations that have already been received. But the goal with that remedial training is to make sure that you don't have a same or similar problem with that driver moving forward, so he doesn't essentially make the situation any worse.
Okay. All right, I got a break here. Drivers, bottom of the hour. And again, if you want to jump in, Attorney Peyton Inge with me at 888-876-2336. And it is time to update what's going on with the news right now here on Sirius XM.
And now the latest from the Road Dog Trucking Radio News Team on Sirius XM.
Drivers, this portion of Sirius XM's Road Dog Trucking News brought to you by Schneider National. Today, as part of National Distracted Driving Month, the American Trucking Association is urging motorists to put their cell phones away and focus on safe driving while behind the wheel of a moving vehicle. ATA President and CEO Bill Graves said, quote, each year, thousands of people are killed in crashes related to distractions. And again, quoting, we urge motorists to put down their phones and keep their eyes and minds on the road. Now, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, more than 3,100 people were killed. Another 424,000 were injured in distraction-related crashes in 2013. While an improvement over the previous year, the ATA still believes much more needs to be done. And some of the country's most professional and safe drivers, the America's Road Team, have some very important information on their website on the dangers of distraction, which can include electronic distractions like navigation systems and cell phones, or more conventional distractions like interacting with passengers and eating inside of the vehicle. Drivers, if you normally travel around New Rochelle, New York, you can expect some brief stoppages and overnight lane closings on Interstate 95 in New Rochelle this week. Single lane closures between exits 15 and 16 in both directions will begin at 11 o'clock tonight and Wednesday and wrap up by 6 a.m. the following day, so an existing sign structure can be removed, and traffic is going to be stopped for no more than about 20 minutes between midnight and 5 a.m. on both nights, and the work is part of the $58.7 million I-95 New England Thruway concrete pavement restoration project. Drivers, that's the news, and again, it's 888-876-2336. Very important that you know these scores, guys. We talk about this stuff on the program, your CSA scores, the SMS scores, very important out there for you to know. How does all of that work? If you got a question for Attorney Peyton Inge, he's got some ideas and some tips on how to improve those scores, how to make them better out there so you've got a chance at surviving out there on the road. In other words, not getting turned away when it comes to maybe getting new business out there. More insurance companies are looking at these kind of numbers out there. A lot of shippers are looking at these numbers out there. Some real hands-on advice here on how to make things better. Back in a few minutes right here, Sirius XM 140.
You're listening to Road Dog Trucking News with Mark Willis.
Drivers, great conversation going on with Peyton Inge. He is a noted trucking and transportation attorney on the line with us. And again, if you want to join us, it's 888-876-2336. The SMS scoring system. You guys know how this works. It assigns your DOT number to a safety and fitness electronic records percentile score. Obviously, the lower the score, the safer the operation is determined to be. Now, if you are, say, an owner-operator with your own authority and you've got, say, 5 trucks, 10 trucks, whatever the case may be, or 20, you've got to be up on these kind of scores. The mega fleets have got entire departments that are dedicated to keeping up with this stuff, and being a small business owner or operator, you might not have those kind of resources out there. You are the company, and that's why it's incumbent upon you to know how these scores work. And Peyton is on talking about how you can improve your safety score. And he's covered a lot of ground with his drivers, and it's important that you do such items as monitor the hours of service. You want to make sure you hire safe drivers. You got to make sure that the equipment is DOT compliant. And I want to ask Peyton a couple of other questions here, but we've got a lot of folks that are holding. Peyton, again, thank you for doing this. Where can drivers maybe find this article? Can they maybe go to your website? Can I post the article on Facebook? What would you recommend for that, sir?
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome to post it on Facebook. It is also available through Transportation Weekly, and I think it's also on our website here at the firm.
Okay, outstanding. And guys, again, I encourage you to really find out about all of this stuff, because I would imagine that part of the problem is that many of the guys and ladies out there might not know fully how these scores work and how to improve those safety numbers. Let's go first, this time around, to Josh in South Dakota. Welcome. You're on with Attorney Peyton Inge.
Oh, actually, I'm in North Dakota, but
well, you've been on hold a long time. Well, welcome.
I am a one-truck operation. I've been in business since 2013. Back in 2013, got a violation on a safety chain on a trailer. I was in a hot shot unit at the time, and fixed the trailer and everything. But ever since then, I have not been pulled into a single scale for any sort of inspection, and I'm trying to find out how I can get the numbers up to help offset that, since I've even asked them at the scale house about getting an inspection done, and I basically get the brush off. They don't want to take the time to even do an inspection on me.
Well, a positive inspection isn't really going to help you for or against, I wouldn't think. I mean, it would be factored into it, but it's certainly not going to help you in any overt way unless you later on down the road get a violation for something. The good news is that because you had the violation in 2013, it's almost rolled off your record entirely. It's down to essentially 1 point, but it's not going to hurt you or cause you any loss at this point. You're doing pretty good.
Okay. Well, that's what I needed to find out. I appreciate the time, guys.
All right, sir.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Let's go next to Troy in Alabama. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Attorney Peyton Inge. Question or comment for him?
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's kind of related to DAC reports. I recently got stuck in a truck stop parking lot in a rainstorm in the mud. My trailer in the parking spot sank clear to the ICC bumper. The company I drive for had to send out a tow truck, of course. They're trying to charge me with a preventable accident because they had to come tow me out of the mud. What recourse do I have at this point against having something like that put on my DAC report?
Well, I would just send a letter to the company and also send a letter to the DAC folks as well.
Yep.
I mean, I'm looking at that saying, that does not seem to be a preventable. That certainly does show the criteria of an accident in my mind.
Yeah, that's what I told them as well, and their thought is, well, it cost us $660 to send the tow truck out to you. That's a preventable accident.
Yeah, I just don't think it would be an accident, was my thought.
So he can contest that on the DAC report itself, I would imagine. Doesn't that operate under the same criteria where if a driver contests maybe a citation or an accident situation, I mean, they could at least present their side of the story on those reports?
I know there's a mechanism for that. I've just never actually had to do it myself.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to say exactly what you can do. I know I've talked to folks and seen links where you can send in your own version of events, so to speak.
Right.
My understanding is it's more like a credit report in that they ask the company for more information, and then they ultimately either go with their decision or they note that there were two different versions of the events.
Okay. And again, all of this does play into the company's record if they're looking at the SMS scores, because I would imagine this is when SMS scores are examined or reviewed, it's not reviewed on a case-by-case basis, or is it? Or is this pretty much reviewed collectively overall, looking at certain patterns when it comes to these kind of scores?
Well, the DAC reports are typically used to, track drivers more often than not.
Okay.
On the safer system, Any violation your driver's going to get, be it for, he was involved in a crash or he actually was issued a citation for that, the crash or something else, that would go against the company on that SAFER system.
Okay, and the SAFER system pretty much looks at each offense to be assigned, is it a severity weight of like 1 to 10,
Right.
for example? How does that work exactly?
They have this little algorithm or chart that shows what any particular safety violation would rank. And if you have an aggravating factor, say you were over your hours of service at the time, or there was drugs or alcohol involved, or you had hazardous cargo, or you were overweight, there are different aggravating factors there that can increase the severity of that of those points that are assigned for that particular incident.
Okay, and you mentioned this earlier about hours of service compliance out there. I know it's absolutely paramount for the company to monitor drivers to make sure compliance is going on. Is it difficult when it comes to the SMS scoring system to measure drivers' performance when it comes to paper logs out there? Does that complicate the matter when it comes to these kind of scoring systems?
Yeah, it does. Paper logs are problematic for anybody to monitor, whether it's an employer or whether it's DOT on the side of the road. But the employers need to proactively obtain those logs and monitor those logs as best they're able to. And if you have, any way to cross-check the validity of those logs, be it against fuel receipts or bills of lading, and just make sure for your own personal, peace of mind that those logs are accurate, the company ought to do that to the best extent they're able to.
All right, and it's important when it comes to the SMS scoring criteria for companies to monitor driver fitness. Am I right about that? Like controlled substances, alcohol, that kind of a thing. Does that all factor into the scoring system?
Absolutely. Driver fitness, there's a couple different components there, but, obviously make sure your drivers have a valid DOT medical card when they come to work for you, and make sure they, maintain a valid DOT medical card. You need to have your drug and alcohol policies and planning procedures, in place, and then you've got to have a formal policy in place, and you need to be making sure that the necessary random tests are being conducted as well.
Okay, and how important is it to hold on to that paperwork, I would imagine, for an extended period of time?
It's very important. If you can't document it, it didn't happen.
Okay, and when it comes to the SMS scoring system, is it very important for the company to enact a zero-tolerance policy and, stick with it, correct?
Yeah, particularly with the drugs and alcohol. You've got to be pretty careful with that because it's a serious event. And if you have somebody that has a problem, one, they need help, but two, you can't afford to let them have that problem behind the wheel of your equipment or on your DOT number.
Okay.
In terms of zero tolerance, that's pretty strict. But at the same time, you've got to, if you have somebody that has a proclivity or has a kind of a habit of skirting the rules, you got to be aware of that.
Okay, and when it comes to that, if say a company does find a driver's got a proclivity towards that, is one of the best courses just immediate dismissal, or do you try to maybe offer remedial training, counseling, that kind of a thing? What would you discuss, or what would you say as far as maybe a company sitting down and discussing that with a driver?
I always tell people that to the best extent you are able, try and look at each offense and each individual as an individual and treat them like an individual as opposed to just throwing them up on the wall and seeing where they fall in your policy. There are certain, drugs and alcohol, you got to be really careful, and there's a better reason to have just a strict zero tolerance policy. But if you have somebody that maybe got an hours of service violation here, you can probably work with them and say, hey guys, look, this is really important. You need to be more careful about it. This is what we're going to do to make sure that you're following the rules that you got to follow. Maybe your equipment is a little bit older. Let's see what we can do to make sure that it's still DOT compliant, that kind of thing, and try and work with that employee to make sure that you're saving, you're saving a valuable asset, one of your, good drivers.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All right, drivers, jump in again. It's 888-876-2336. Do you have your own authority, ladies and gentlemen? If you've ever had a chance to deal with something like that, I'm sure you've factored in the SMS scoring that comes into play. This is the scoring system that basically is an indicator of just how well you're doing out there. And a lot of insurance companies are looking at this, and a lot of the shippers out there are looking at this as well. And Peyton's brought up a number of factors on the ways that you can improve these numbers. 7 SMS categories. Components are unsafe driving violations. Number 2, the hours of service violations, knowing driver fitness, drug and alcohol violations. We touched on maintenance, hazardous material compliance. We're going to discuss that in just a minute. And the crash indicator assessment. That is one of the biggest things you need to know about, how all of those numbers come into play. And I encourage you to jump in if you've got any questions about this. 50 minutes after, that means it is time for a weather update right now on the Sirius XM Road Dog Trucking Channel. A lot of moving parts with this, ladies and gentlemen. There is a corridor of heavy rain looking to focus on a zone stretching from eastern Texas to central Alabama. This is the area that's most likely to get a lot of widespread rainfall totals, between 4 to 8 inches by the end of the week. And some locations in this zone may even pick up over a foot of rain between now and Friday. Some significant rainfall totals of this nature, while not as widespread, may also be possible in some of the communities elsewhere in the southeast where torrential downpours impact the same area multiple days in a row. While most of the week will be free of heavy rain in the northeast, look for some rain to fall in the mid-Atlantic area starting tonight and heading into Wednesday. I'm Mark Willis, live across North America right here on the Sirius XM Road Dog Trucking Channel.
You're listening to Road Dog Trucking News with Mark Willis.
Drivers, again, the phone number to call in, it's 888-876-2336 all across North America. Man, we're flying through this hour. Attorney Peyton Inge is on the phone with me right now, noted trucking and transportation attorney. And, sir, thank you. Always a great pleasure. Thank you for breaking down the story here, because there's a lot of moving legal parts to this, and it's important for drivers to know the information here, for the companies, for the owner-operators with their own authority to get on board and learn this stuff. Peyton, I had a question come in on Facebook from Ed just a few minutes ago. He wants to know, let me get your thoughts on this concerning FMCSA. Now, the FMCSA does not give drivers a CSA or an SMS score. Is that correct?
Yeah, the FMCSA score doesn't address the drivers themselves individually.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to get that on the table, because we've had a lot of question about that. So again, the FMCSA does not address the driver on an individual basis. And again, if a driver wants to maybe learn more information about how their scores are impacted, they need to get a copy of the DAC report. We're talking about this from a broader perspective, ladies and gentlemen, as far as like SMS numbers, the number of carriers that are out there vying for business. It's important that you guys know what these numbers are. Now, one of the main items here that we've got to bring up here before we get ready to wrap up, the crash indicator assessment. What is that exactly? What are some of the moving parts that are associated with that as far as the crash indicator assessment? Why is that important?
Well, those are important because they are numbers that are, essentially scored against your DOT number that are derived from the crashes and the severity of the crashes that your drivers are involved in on a yearly basis.
Okay, all right. So again, part of that moving machine, so to speak, when it comes to looking at the various components. Let's go next to Joe in Ohio. Joe, thanks for waiting, sir. Question or comment for Attorney Peyton Inge?
Yes, sir. I had a question about the random drug testing. Work for a small company. We have a policy, of the random testing or whatnot. But I haven't been tested in probably 3 or 4 years. Would that be a red flag for me or the company if we had an audit?
I get asked that question a lot. The truth is random testing is just that. It's random testing. Now, depending on the number of employees that your company has, if you hadn't been selected, I would tend to think that might be a red flag. But as long as the policies and procedures are there, either by the company itself or by a third party, which is probably the best way to do it if your company can afford it, where they randomly select everybody in your category of driver, and they make sure that applicable percentage is being tested, you're going to be fine.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the call. Attorney Peyton Inge, drivers with us again. It's 888-876-2336. You know, and there's so many different factors that come into consideration here. I know we've only addressed just a handful of what goes into the SMS scoring system. But Peyton, as we get ready to wrap up, reiterate the importance of knowing the numbers here, at least trying to wrap the brain around this kind of a scoring system, because ultimately it does come down to whether or not companies are going to be getting business out there. More and more companies, more insurance companies are looking at this. More shippers are looking at these numbers to make determinations whether or not that carrier is going to be a fit when it comes to moving their freight, right?
Absolutely. You've got to stay on top of it, and you need to proactively manage your safety rating.
Okay, outstanding. One more time, sir, the websites and all that. You do Twitter as well? Where can they reach out to you?
I don't do Twitter. I've heard of it. I've never done it myself. I'm just getting into the 21st century. I've got Facebook, I guess, now, sort of.
Oh, do you really? Okay.
Yeah. Still don't remember my password. But you can still reach me at the firm's website, chamblee-ryan.com, CHAMBLEE Ryan, RYAN.com.
Okay, outstanding. And I'll post a link to that. And again, the story that we've covered here, I mean, it is up on the firm's website, correct, Annette, just to reiterate?
Yeah, the article that I wrote should be up on the firm's website at this point.
Okay, outstanding, man. Let's do it again. Thanks for breaking this down for us, and come back real soon. Thanks for spending the time.
Thanks.
That is Attorney Peyton Inge, drivers on the phone with us, and great resource. And I really want to encourage you to reach out to him if you've got any questions or comments. Very interesting article, because what this article is breaking down is understanding the SMS scoring system, and it's likely that you built your company from the ground up, growing from one truck to multiple vehicles. Your accounts have more freight, and you want to keep that business. Good drivers are scarce. Idle rigs cost you a lot of dinero, and the obvious solution is to hire more drivers. And according to Peyton, it sounds easy, right? But it's not. The FMCSA's new safety measurement scoring system monitors the violations accumulated by your drivers and measures the safety performance of your company against your competitors. Obviously, the worse score, the more likely the FMCSA will initiate a targeted investigation of your company. The million-dollar question is, what can you do to improve your company's safety score? Now, if you're an owner-operator with your own authority, I mean, obviously you got to follow what's going on with the DAC report. You got to stay up on top of that. I think you've got the right to contest anything in that DAC report. If you think you've been unfairly targeted with a ticket, for example, you can put in your side of the story. I think it's called Higher Right. I think that's the new name of the company out there, but you've got a chance to contest anything inside of that report. From the broader perspective, the SMS scores are very important, for the fleets. I mean, we're talking about maybe 5, 10, 20 trucks out there, and the mega carriers have got whole divisions that are dedicating their time to keeping up with these kind of scores. And if you're one of the smaller operators out there, I mean, let's face it, you're driving that truck. You got a lot of stuff you got to do. You got to keep that business running. And probably one of the things that might slip through the cracks from time to time is understanding these SMS scoring numbers. All right, that's going to wrap up that segment, ladies and gentlemen. I'll post this story up where you can read it on Facebook at SiriusXM's Road Dog Trucking News.